So let's break it down. ARV criteria, there's 6 main things that I look at when I'm trying to find an after repair value for a property that I'm considering making a move on, right? And by the way, another thing, most of you have probably heard of this, but I'm going to say it just in case. ARV, to determine the after repair value of a subject property, which is a property that we're looking at and analyzing, it's a process of, we call it running comps, which means finding comparable properties to the property that we're looking at, so we can find a trend to be able to very accurately estimate what we will resell our property for at the end of the day. Okay, running comps is how we do it. Like, that's a little real estate jargon. Most of you guys probably know that, but if not, please credit me if that's the first time that you've heard about it. Say that I made it up, okay? Now, the 6 ARV criteria, number 1, we have recently completed sales. Our comps that we're looking at have to be recently completed. They have to be sold recently. And we're going to break all these down. So number 2, they have to be within the same neighborhood. Number 3, they have to be similar square footage. Number 4, they have to be similar characteristics as a subject property. Number 5, they need to be the similar age or year built. And number 6, reasonable selling time. So let's break down comp criteria. Number 1, recently completed sales. So comps, if we have a subject property, I always like to use the hypothetical property 123 Main Street. If I'm looking at 123 Main Street, the comps, when I'm trying to establish an ARV for 123 Main Street, they need to be recent sales, so we stay as safe as possible and as accurate as possible when we resell our property to flip. If you're a wholesaler, this is how your end buyer is likely, not definitely, but very likely going to be looking at the property. We ideally want these comps to apply when we begin to resell a few months after we buy the property. So for me, as somebody that's flipping a house, I'm going to buy the property, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 months flipping the property, like doing renovation, construction stuff to it. Then when I get it on the market, the comps, when I bought the property, I still want them to apply when I'm reselling it. So after 6 months, comps are no longer relevant for the most part to an appraiser, and they're likely too old to let us know if there's a current trend with buyer behavior in a given neighborhood. Okay, because of this, I prioritize my comps in this order. The most important are, if I'm looking at 123 Main Street, I want to see similar properties that have sold in the last 30 days. The second priority is between 31 and 90 days. And the third priority is between 91 and 180 days. If something sold longer than 180 days ago or 6 months ago, I will not consider the property as a comp. If I'm buying the property, all the comps that I'm looking at have to have sold within the last 6 months. The more recent the sales, the more relevant to our property they are. If I got something that sold 3 weeks ago, it's way more relevant than if it sold in, June, okay? Because it's going to be way more applicable when I resell the property in January. Here's an example of properties that have sold in the last 12 months in a random area that I pulled. This is Redfin. I think you guys have the ability to do this kind of stuff on the DealMachine app as well, right, Matt? So this is an example of stuff sold in the last 6 months. Take that same area. This is what it looks like in the previous one was last 12 months. This is the last 6 months. This is the last 3 months, right? You really narrow down the options that you have to use as comps, but in doing that, you get way more accurate in being able to predict what your house can sell for at the end of the day, what our maximum value would be. So that was number 1. Comp criteria number 2, these properties, in addition to being sold in the last 6 months, they need to be within the same neighborhood. So comps need to be in the same neighborhood as a subject property. We ask agents, or you can run comps with the DealMachine app. You can look at them on Redfin or any of these websites that are out there. But we get comps, gather comps that are within, at first, if we're asking someone to send stuff, I usually say within 1 mile of my subject property. But then we sort them out on a map to make sure they're within our major neighborhood boundaries, okay? This is that same neighborhood. Let's say I have 6 months comps for a neighborhood. I ask a real estate agent to send me everything that's sold within the last 6 months within a mile of my subject property. Well, they've sent me all these properties that you see in blue, but you can see there's like a river, or it looks like a canal. Looks like there's a freeway right there. There's a main street. So if I have that subject property, I'm going to look at it on a map view and then determine where the neighborhood boundaries would be to make sure I'm getting apples to apples accurate data for my property. So that's like my little doodle it with my finger of what the neighborhood boundaries would be. You could typically eyeball this kind of stuff, not only with freeways and stuff like that, but if you look at the grid of the streets, a lot of times you can see where a lot of properties have dead ends. And then there's like almost another entrance to another neighborhood, even though it's relatively close to our subject property. One neighborhood versus another one that's right next to our subject property neighborhood could have a tremendous increase in value or decrease in value. Maybe it's a different school district. Maybe there's a different property tax rate. So you want to make sure you're looking in the same neighborhood within those borders. Okay, here's an example of good comps. They're all within the red line. Here's an example of bad comps. They're all outside of the red line. The interesting thing is those bad comps may be closer to our subject property than those good ones. Okay, but those bad comps, you can even see with this, you can see just to the right of our property, not on the south side of that canal. Those properties are going for 300s and 400s. All the stuff within our neighborhood is going for mid to high 200s. Right? Those properties are very close, but they're on the other side of neighborhood boundaries. We want to make sure we pay attention to that. Group comps up by distance first, and then eliminate the ones that might fall outside of the neighborhood borders. All right, comp criteria number 3, similar square footage. We want our comps to be as close as possible to the same size characteristics of our subject property. Comps need to be within 10% of the subject property square footage, or 150 square feet, whatever is larger. So if a subject property, let's say 123 Main Street, we're looking at it, we want to do a deal with it, we're trying to analyze what it can resell for in the future to determine how good of a discount we're actually getting on a property. 10% of 1,500 square feet is 150 square feet. So if I am trying to run comps and look at the square footage of properties that I'm going to use that are going to be most apples to my property, I'm looking at 150 square feet down from 1,500 square feet and 150 square feet up from 1,500 square feet. Right? That's 10% either way. So I'm looking at properties between 1,350 and 1,650 square feet. If something's up at 1,750, that's too big. If it's under 1,350, I'll use it if it's within the same trend as all the other properties that are within that square footage kind of realm. But I'm never stretching comps and taking something that's a little bit too big, because a lot of times that dictates a little bit different of a price point. Now, there's a couple exceptions to this. If a property is less than 1,500 square feet, but above 1,000 square feet, I'm still using plus or minus 150 square feet. Now, if you got these little tiny properties under 1,000 square feet, which I've made a ton of money off of them, I love them, I'll bring it down to going plus or minus 100 square feet of the subject property. Note, you can always use smaller comps if they help support your value. Do not use larger comps though. Comp criteria 4, similar characteristics. Now, comps need to be in similar bedroom and bathroom count characteristics, okay, to our subject property. Oftentimes, small bedroom count differences aren't a huge deal, especially when your subject property has 5 or more bedrooms. But the lower the bedroom count, the more similar comps need to be. A 2-bedroom house is definitely not comparable to a 3-bedroom house. Like if I've got a 2-bedroom, 1-bath or 2-bedroom, 2-bath, I'm not using 3-bedroom, 1-bath or 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses, unless, there's also a little caveat, unless I have the square footage to be able to add a 3rd bedroom into the house and make it comparable to those properties that would be comps. So the smaller counts with beds and baths, the more accurate you need to be with it. Once you get up to like 5 bedrooms, like you can use, I'm fine with taking a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom subject property and using a 6-bedroom property, as long as it meets all the other criteria. Okay, a 1-bedroom house is absolutely not comparable to a 2-bedroom house. Completely different type of buyer. Maybe someone has a family with kids. Maybe there's somebody that needs a home office, and a 1-bedroom house wouldn't cut it, and a 2-bedroom house would. So like the lower it gets, like the more strict we have to be with that. But we usually find exact bedroom count comps for smaller bedroom count properties, so it's not a big issue very often, right? Again, if you got 2-bed, 1-bathroom houses in the neighborhood, there's typically a lot of them that have been built. Ironically, it's typically like 1950s houses. You get a lot of 2-1s, a lot of 3-1s. Newer houses aren't usually built that small. Now, varying bathroom counts have a larger value difference in bedrooms, especially with lower bathroom count houses. At the very bottom, a 1-bathroom house is not a comp with a 1-bathroom house is not a comp to a 2-bathroom house, and a 2-bathroom house is not a comp to a 1-bathroom house. There's usually a substantial difference between the value of the two. This is a quote that I learned like my first day of real estate. Going from a 1-bath to a 2-bath home is a necessity, but going from a 2-bath to a 3-bath would be a nicety for a lot of families. But like, if I'm looking at my wife and I, 9 years ago, we had 1 child. We had to have a 2-bathroom minimum house. It'd be very hard for me to have like a 1-bathroom house with a child. And that's the way a lot of people look at it. And when we're running comps, we're finding an ARV, we are finding a trend of buyer behavior in a given neighborhood. Okay, the buyer is going to be different, and the behavior is going to be different when you have these different characteristic homes. Okay. Now, important, we need the comps to match what our bedroom bathroom count is going to be, not necessarily what it already is, right? This is little advanced stuff for you. Like, I've made a lot of money buying 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom homes that are a little bit larger in square foot, where there's a bunch of comps of 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom homes where I buy the house at a really big discount, and then I add a second bath, like a 3/4 bath in the master bedroom. And there's a lot of times like a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 price increase, value increase. So the comps that we're using need to reflect the characteristics of the property once we've done all of our work to it. So comp criteria number 5, similar age. Okay, comps need to have been built within 12 years of the subject property, ideally within the same decade. Different decades had different styles of homes being built. Here we'll give you a nice little like photo essay that I found stuff on Google where I could find different houses built in different decades. 1950s, you got these kind of ranch style homes. Same with 1960s, they got a little bit different. 1970s, the ugliest decade in home building. I hate 1970s houses, especially these split level houses. I'll flip them if the comps tell me that I can, but just from a personal preference, I don't know what they were thinking. I think they were doing a lot of drugs in the 70s. No judgment, but I don't know about those ones. 1980s, houses started being built up, property taxes and property value, like smaller amount of land and building up would minimize property value. Builders came in, they figured they could build 20 houses on this group of parcels instead of 10 houses and make more money. So that started happening in the 80s. That's also stucco came into play, which I've grinded my hand like a cheese grater on stucco numerous times. 1990s, you start seeing like pavers and like, just kind of custom stuff on landscaping and things like that. So there's a lot of different tastes and different styles when it comes to the different decades that homes were built. Now, when I look at properties, I'm not looking at it emotionally at all based on my personal preference. Like I looked at that 1970s house, I'm like, gosh, that is horrendous. What was the builder thinking? But in that neighborhood, if you've got comps built in the 1970s with similar ugly split level houses, and I can get it for enough of a discount, I will buy that thing all day, as long as the numbers are right, and as long as I can get an accurate read on my after repair value. So if the subject property, for example purposes, if the subject property was built in 1970, comps should be built between 1958, 12 years down, and 1982, 12 years up. Ideally, you want to be between 1960 and 1980, but I'll give you a couple of years and I won't be too mad at you if you stretch it just a little bit. Now, an exception is properties built before 1950. If I have a 1907 house, I'll go all the way up to 1950. They started mass producing neighborhoods. Builders come in and, they have, 3 different models of homes that they're building every 3 houses. That happened after World War II, so late 1940s and then the 1950s. That's when you see these model matches. But before that, a lot of homes were custom. If you got something before 1950, you can use that whole range from 0 AD till 1950 to run your comps, because usually they were kind of custom. Now, comp criteria number 6, reasonable selling time. This means days on market. Comps need to be under 90 days on market. Days on market, DOM. It's the amount of market exposure a property has from the day it's listed for sale, that for sale sign goes up in the yard, until the day it goes under contract, okay? This is something that a lot of people kind of get confused on or get kind of tripped up on. It's not the day that it was listed till the day that it's sold. It's just the amount of market exposure while a property is active on the market before the seller of a home accepted an offer and the property was taken off the market, okay? So days on market, it indicates market exposure. You can get a very good trend on how long it's going to take to sell your property. If you renovate it in the correct way, if your ARV is correct, it's priced in the correct way, you can usually tell pretty accurately how long your project's going to be, as long as your contractor does stuff in the reasonable amount of time. Okay. If all comps are under 30 days on market, it's indicative of a hypermarket that you're in. I love under 30 days on market. I especially love under 15 days on market. Sometimes that's seasonal. You'll see under 30 days on market average a lot of times in the spring and summer. Then we get into the fall and winter, it goes up a little bit. But if all comps are under 30 days, love it. Now, if all comps are under 60 days, like between 31 and 60 days, it's still indicative of a good market. It's not a hypermarket, and I like it. I doesn't love it. I does like it, okay? And if all comps are under 90 days on market, meaning 61 to 90 days, it's an acceptable market. I will do the deal, but I won't expect to be selling the house right away. It's going to have some market exposure, at least what I would predict or anticipate. It's going to be a couple of months before I get the right offer. Okay. And again, I want the comps when I bought the property to be applicable to the property when I resell the property. And so once you get past 90 days, like nothing is applicable from when you first bought it. So if something's over 90 days, like, no, thank you. That's what I would recommend. Okay. I would recommend that very strongly. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're all business owners. But if all comps are over 90 days on market, don't touch it.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.